Are you or your clients using podcasts to build your business or any kind of periodic media? I want to share with you some of the challenges that I face personally having a number of podcasts, as well as using media in order to promote my business, the newsletter, and the other things that we offer here at Adbury Things Copywriting Tips. I'm Justin Hitt, and let's just get started. Very often, when creating periodic content to promote your business, it is extremely difficult. Yes, you can just rough draft, throw content up like I do, but I will tell you, it is not the most productive way to generate leads and to produce new customers. It is a great way to get ideas down that later can be cultivated into special reports, articles, and other materials. And that's the value of having copywriters available, having marketers available, because you can rough draft something, have it transcribed, and then from that transcription, create different types of materials. Now, with AI, it makes it even easier. The big challenge with AI, though, is that you can create a script for a podcast, have it narrated, and completely eliminate the human element. And that, for some, is believable as a alternative to sitting down and going through the frustrations I'm going to talk with you today about. One of the frustrations that I have is I found out today that I haven't produced any content on this channel since December. That means if it's February now, we've had 2 months with no content. And if we don't have periodic, regular content, many of our subscribers will forget that we exist. Now, I'm talking to the subscriber that typically listens to the entire podcast, who takes notes, who uses some of the materials that we have. So today, when I talk about ways to make your podcast more productive, you're writing down notes. Like, for example, transcribing your podcasts and turning them into articles and other materials for your website or for lead generation pieces. But it is frustrating to pull up a listing, and while I've published videos on other channels, and while I've written content for clients, and while I've written content on the email newsletter, many of your listeners will only see you on one channel. They're not going to take the time to listen to you on Apple Podcast and then also watch you on YouTube and then also get your email newsletter and then also get maybe a print newsletter. That does not happen unless they're giving you money. Now, when I was a member of GKIC with Dan Kennedy and I was a diamond member, I read every piece of material I got. I read every email. I unsubscribed to other lists because, again, I'm paying every month to be a part of that environment. And in fact, I'm leveraging that environment to push out the distractions. So instead of chasing the latest new thing from Frank Kern or Russell Brunson or from Jay Abraham, I'm focusing on one environment, and then I'm implementing as much as I possibly can. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with those people, and it was not an expense. It was an investment, because every time I did what I learned, I gained significant results. Now, with podcasting being as easy as it is, and that compulsion to create content, with YouTube videos being as easy as they are, and there's so many video channels to market on, there is a desire to maybe learn something, teach it, and then implement it later or help a client implement it. And I'm saying that's the worst possible thing. So in one case, I'm a little upset that I haven't published new content to my marketing channel, which is a podcast. And again, it really can feel this way on every marketing channel. And it might feel like you're behind, but what have you done in that time? Well, during that time, I've served clients. I've worked on larger projects. I've done things that are much more engaging and financially beneficial than the podcast itself. So I forgive myself for not publishing regularly. However, I can go in the stats and show that when I'm not putting regular content on the YouTube channel, I'm losing traction in that environment. When I'm not putting regular content on the podcast, I'm losing traction there as well. One solution is to pre-record all your content and then to drip it into those channels so that you have a consistent, regular drop of new content. Recycle old content. So, for example, you can mash up old content. For example, I met with a video producer a couple days ago. I showed him I had all this audio content. If we run it through AI to figure out where the best engaging content is, we can then take clips. And then we can take a 15-minute podcast, it's only in audio, and turn it into a 5-minute video with visual elements and B-roll and stuff. And now we can take what I created in one channel and use it in another. I go into this in a lot of detail in our coaching program when we talk about recycling your marketing. But the key concept is, unless you have somebody who's focusing on that publishing schedule, very often you may get distracted, and that distraction could cause you to get behind. And then you have this feeling of being behind, which distracts you again from doing those things that are necessary. So we can build a library of content and we can recycle. Another factor too, I don't understand, is that why do I need to create content every week or every month when I've got 500 episodes that people can go back into and listen to and build up the context? We have to understand that that person that wants something new every week, that's looking for that new nuance, they're not necessarily productive people. If they're implementing and then they're looking for that edge so that they can get a little bit better than the next guy, or they can just get a little bit different traction in a marketplace, that person is going to probably do 2 or more channels. That person is going to write in with questions. I have answered a lot of questions that have come in. I got a backlog of like 15 videos and 5 or 10 audios. I'm doing this recording while I'm ingesting content on Lightroom because I've got my phone filled up. All the things that can go wrong will go wrong. Here's the larger point. When we talk about podcasting, I have a program called Podcasting for Profits. The podcast itself is about market research and discovery. So where can we find new prospects? What channels are they spending time on? Where are they seeking information and resources? And then it's also about getting the core ideas and concepts down so that when we're having a conversation with somebody and they ask a question that's not in the context of a consultation, it's not in the context of an engagement, we can say, oh, well, check out such and such episode. I wrote an article yesterday for the email newsletter. And about halfway through, I'm thinking, well, I've talked about this topic before. I looked up the podcast and I put a little paragraph in there that says, hey, if you want more information about this, check out this podcast. And then I just concluded the article and I'm done. So now I've got to like give you a 200-word email for an email newsletter that's linking to another piece of content I already created. Rather than repeating myself, I'm pointing back into the library. So once a month is good enough for a podcast if during the rest of the time you are creating content in other mediums. So if you decide to take on LinkedIn, podcasting, YouTube channel, and other channels, so let's say you got 4 channels, you're going to want to publish something once a month on each channel and then stagger them so that maybe it looks like it comes out every week. And then for each of those pieces you've published on a third-party channel, you're going to want to have a lead generation campaign on the back end. So maybe in the descriptions of each of these things, it links back to your prospect newsletter. And then at the prospect newsletter, you're going to want to have a piece of content for each of these third-party pieces that you put out. And so it quickly gets overwhelming. And that's why for the freelance copywriter or the freelance marketer, I really encourage you to get a virtual assistant. It is a low-skill activity to write a summary about something that's already been produced or to run a transcript and have it summarized and write it into a little article than it is to create the original piece. So now you'll be focusing on 4 long-form pieces each month. And I know some of you guys are saying, could I produce the same piece on YouTube, use it on an audio podcast, use it on a different channel and chop it all? You can. But again, there are different types of people on each of these channels. The folks that are on YouTube tend to be more visual. The folks that are on audio podcasts tend to be more, they listen to things while they're doing something else. Folks that are going to read your email newsletter, they tend to live in email a lot. As long as you're connecting with the modality of the channel and consistently putting something of value on the channel, because this isn't about quantity, this is about quality, you could, and this is what I recommend for high-income professionals, lawyers, architects, you could just sit down once a month and record 4 hours of video and then pass that to a company that is going to process that for you. They're going to extract elements. Now, let me just real quick, here's the tip to make that work really well. You're going to create an outline that has 4 or 5 segments within the outline, all on the same topic. So, for example, if I was talking about podcasting for profits, this podcast would fit into that, but I might have it as a segment and have an outline in front of me that I'm going to go through the 5. Here are the 5 things you need to do to make sure you can create regular content so that you don't run out of ideas. Number 1, read news in your industry. Number 2, monitor your client success stories. Number 3, ask questions of yourself and answer the questions of your prospect. Number 4, write a journal and outline ideas rather than write ideas. And number 5, build on the audience needs, and you'll have an unlimited supply of content. See, I would build out segments like that. And then your editor can take the segments and extract them. Your assistant can extract them. There's a lot of great tools out there, by the way. And they could extract these things, and then they can put something on one channel, something on another channel. And we call this person a marketing coordinator because they are going to have a bounce back offer on every description. They need to have appropriate lower third materials, appropriate B-roll, appropriate slides or whatever you're going to present to your audience. And then, of course, they need to have it in the right format for each of these channels. And so if you're doing all that, you're not doing billable work for clients. And so that's why you get behind. That's why it gets frustrating. But I'm saying to you right now, I have the same frustrations. Again, I hadn't published on this particular channel for almost 2 months. That doesn't mean that I don't care about the podcast. It just means that I'm busy serving clients and the client gets priority. So you can package up a recording session once a week. And I actually went and visited a studio. I'm thinking about just going to the studio once a week, knocking out a 4-hour session, lay out all my notes, put up some boards with the checklists and stuff, and just do a kind of an infomercial style presentation. And then ultimately have that chopped up into podcasts, have it chopped up into shorts and reels and all the different stuff that needs to be done while I'm off serving clients because I've gotten the flow going. When we take you from a freelance copywriter or freelance marketer, we graduate you into an agency. The agency that I'm talking about could simply be a virtual assistant that maintains your calendar and helps you schedule more consultations. It could be a marketing coordinator who is working with different people who are doing the editing or using different tools to do the editing to get you these segments out there. And then a copywriter that is in your wings that is helping you with building out content that converts. Because that's the last thing I want to cover. All of this content must be demonstrative. It must engage your audience. It must offer them something of value. See, I have to make sure that I drop something you can use right away in this podcast. Otherwise, you're not going to get the reinforcement of implementation. It always has to have a bounce back. That's why at the end of every one of these, I say, if you have any questions about what I've covered here today, please contact us at www.edbriefings.co.uk. I won't always see the comments because we syndicate over 27 different channels, and I want to make sure that your questions get answered. And see, you're going to insert these things everywhere. You're going to have them memorized. You're ultimately also going to have, which I'm not very good at, is some visual elements for continuity between platforms. I currently do not have continuity between platforms. Like I said, I didn't publish on the podcast channels, which is Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're all over the place. But I did on YouTube. They get syndicated to Rumble, BitChute, and a bunch of other places. And I did write some email newsletters. But again, like I said, your typical prospect will not see you on multiple channels. A client, like a coaching client or a retainer client, they will see you on multiple channels. And if you're inconsistent on these channels, they will attribute that to your general inconsistency. Or hopefully you keep them, you're helping them grow their business so they're busy that they're not listening to podcasts all the damn time. But long story short, if you're not managing these things, your list will go down. I can look at my stats and see that 2 months of no podcast episodes has reduced my listener base by 20 to 30%. Now, what does that mean? It just means I didn't have anything for my people to listen to, and most people tend to listen to new content, and they don't typically go back to. They don't open their podcast listen. When I listen to a podcast in the car, I don't go and scroll through 20, 30 pages of podcasts to see if I like one that I can listen to. I pull it up, I look at the last 5 latest podcasts, that's all that gets synced to the phone, and I pick one. That's it. That's how I work. Most people just listen to whatever's next. And if you don't have something that's next, if you don't have a call to action for the next engagement, if you don't have the next episode, if you don't have the next channel, or you're not cross-pollinating channels, then it will just die out. And I'll tell you from experience, I have let channels die out. I had like 16,000, 20,000 contacts in my system that were leads built from a handful of channels. Some of them were getting 500 unique visitors a day. And they all petered out because I went off to work for a big company, and I spent a lot of time with that client and really did not continually provide quality content that reconnects, that re-engages. Now, again, like I said, with the Recycle Your Marketing program, we do talk about ways that you can just constantly recycle. And then if you have the structure that we talk about when we talk about agencies, you could have somebody who their sole purpose in life is to recycle your content. Dan Kennedy talked about one time that he has these binders of transcripts from different programs, or if he's going to write about something, his assistant would go through and find all the programs that are similar to the topic he wanted to write about, or the new product he wanted to put out. Then they would transcribe everything, and then he would highlight sections, and they would cut and paste, and finally they'd have a product. And he would just add the new materials that kind of stitched everything together, or maybe re-record sections that were unclear. But ultimately, that's how he was preparing a presentation. That is months of work. But once you create the presentation, if it's a selling presentation, you can use it year after year. If it's a good quality training program, you can sell it. If it's something that sets up high ticket clients, then again, that investment works for a long time. And that's why we library materials. That's why I have to ingest content, because we have more content that we can publish. And that's why when a client writes in with a question, or a prospect writes in with a question, there's a whole system for turning that into something. Now, just because I didn't publish doesn't mean I didn't get any questions. It's just very easy to get a backlog when you're distracted by content creation. That's better than content consumption, but when you're distracted by content creation rather than customer conversion. And so when I'm out doing customer conversion, this other stuff is not as important. I got, there's billable work to do. That is the most important thing. Serving your client is the most important thing. So I hope what I've shared with you today has been helpful. I work really hard to make sure I can get you little tidbits to take you to the next level. Because if you're out there thinking you can do it all yourself, maybe you could 20 years ago when things were a little bit slower. But today you need a team, and that team needs to be doing specific things. And all together it rolls up into a more consistent view to the target customers you have. I'm not talking about splashing this stuff on a bunch of channels. I'm talking about writing and creating material for specific people who can buy what it is that you have to offer. Like I say in many programs, and I am so grateful when you write in with your questions. I may not see the comments below this video or this audio or wherever it's published, because it does reach so many different people. But if you visit www.adbriefings.co.uk and go to the contact page, you can ask questions. But maybe you don't have a question and you simply want to join our free newsletter that has resources and points to all this other content that's floating around the internet. We can find something that's going to help you get to the next level. What's the next level for subscribers? The next level is going from a freelance agency where you're chasing work to a freelancer, or to an agency that has some automation in it. You're still kind of a freelancer. It's still going to be a 1099. But in many cases, you're going to have the structure in place to do higher ticket work. And again, when you have the skills of recycling, you're practicing your people and what you can do for your clients. You can do this for your clients. There's a pain point here for any subject matter expert, for any company that is trying to reach a larger audience. There's a pain point here where you can do what we just talked about, as well as add the copywriting, as well as add the marketing structure, as well as add the systems that you do so well. This is powerful. This is how you get to the next level. Be sure to write in. That's really all I ask, is you just write in with your questions. I love to hear from you. And ultimately, I hope to see you sooner than 2 months. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefings Copywriting Tips.